Hi, my name is Ashley Watt, and this is my Module 12 Tort Liability Cases presentation for school law course. Tort is defined as an act or omission that gives rise to or harm or injury to another. It can be negligent, it can be physical or verbal, and I think the negligent is where school districts tend to get into a lot of trouble. We almost have to become hypersensitive to issues that could arise, whether it be facility maintenance or the fact that students aren't being monitored on a certain hallway during passing period. We kind of have to predict where problems could arise so that we don't find ourselves in some of these issues. The first case study that I chose was Mitchell versus Cedar Rapids School District. This was actually the case of a 14-year-old and a 19-year-old student skipping two of their afternoon classes. The 14-year-old female even told her mother a story that she was going to a friend's house after school. In the course of that time, she was actually raped. And this came back on the school because the courts ruled that the system that they had to report absent students was actually kind of negligent. They, like many of us, have a computerized system that at the beginning of every hour a teacher plugs in if students are absent or present. The only thing that their system does at the end of the day at 5 o'clock that evening will call their parents automated and said your student was missing from this class and is unexcused. So there really wasn't any point that they went out in search of this student. Both of these students had IEPs, and neither of them were behavioral though. The teacher actually had mentioned most of the time I do more than just what the school requires to find a student, but unfortunately at this point she did not. And so the courts actually found in favor of the family, and the school district had to pay them $500,000. Case study 2, Brodishek versus Millard Schools. This was a PE class, and they had to move their golf unit inside for a day because of the weather outside. There was 2 teachers for almost 60 kids. So one teacher was helping the girls on one side, and one was helping a specific boy on the other side and not paying attention to the others. And unfortunately, in that time, one student got too close to another and was hit with a golf club. And several days later, he actually passed away. So the courts ruled in favor of this family because the school did not provide proper supervision, and they actually had written rules in their school policies to state if we had to move the golf session inside, this is how it needs to be set up. And the courts proved that they didn't do that correctly, and if they had, this student would have had a really hard time getting injured the way that he did. So I think this is one that I can see definitely happening because, you know, especially with so many students, this could be I just think of PE class and how easily kids can be tripped, let alone if they have something in their hand. And so just being hypervigilant is another part of this. And I'm going to talk at the end of this about what I feel like schools can do to make sure that they keep all of this safe. In case study 3, this was Androsi versus the town of East Haven. The coach was actually sued for negligence after a student tripped on a bench that was in his lane, and it actually caused a femur fracture. So they claimed negligence because of the coach. They did not find it in favor of the family on this one though, because the court ruled that the act was non-ministerial but discretionary under the government law. So that meant that this student, because of this activity's voluntary measures, the student chose to be at track practice, and that there's actually an immunity defense that is out there for governmental parks and agencies, which schools actually are. So the coach actually didn't, or the school didn't actually have to pay on this one, but they did claim negligence. Case study 4, this was actually in Kansas, in Wichita. So the school district was sued because during a physical education course, again, after they had already done what they were supposed to do for the day, students were still in the gym, and a student said, "Hey, can I use this springboard to try to touch the rim of the basketball court?" They'd done it for years and years. Students had never gotten hurt, and so the teacher's like, "Sure, try it." And this child missed, fell, and he actually had several fractures. They found that they found actually in favor of the school district on this one. And I just want to read really quick the act that kind of pertains to the last two that I talked about. A governmental entity or employee acting with the scope of an employee's employment shall not be liable for damages resulting from any claim based upon the exercise of performance or the failure to exercise or perform a discretionary function or duty, or any claim for injuries resulting from the use of any public property intended or permitted to be used as a park, playground, or open area for recreational purposes. So those statutes actually aid schools as well, to make sure that if somebody gets injured while they're out walking on the track. I know here at school we actually have an older couple that comes and walks during the day, and so that would help our agency if for some reason one of them got hurt while they were doing that. Case study 5 is Collins versus Bossier Parish School Districts. This is something that I can absolutely see happening on any school ground. They had a kindergarten student was using the monkey bars. The one that was behind him wrapped his legs around him, and they both fell, and he ended up fracturing his leg in several places. The parents of the injured student sued the school district and the student that did it. The school district did not have to pay because they actually supported their findings, which I honestly was kind of surprised about, because in the readings it said that they required one recess teacher for almost 100 students, which scares me a lot to think of, but that's what they had, and so the courts ruled in favor of the school on that one, but the parent of the other student actually had to pay for that. So some things that I think of, the reaction to the negligent claims. I think some of the most important things that we can do, here, we've talked about in our schools recently a lot about all of the crisis drills that we're having to do this year. And in the case of an actual crisis, and that can be anything, and I think that relates back to even this, is that no one talks to the media or chit-chats with a friend about it. Everything is very confidential. So if a discussion like that comes up, you just don't say anything unless your superintendent or boss has given you something to say about the matter to somebody. It's important for schools to report issues and document things that they have. Like in the first case, of the two IEP students who left school together, they were seen having really honestly inappropriate contact at school, holding hands, kissing. You could tell that they were paying each other extra attention. That should have been documented, and at some point, realizing they were both gone and they were together, that should have maybe warranted an extra phone call home or more feet on the ground trying to find where these students actually went to. I think that you have to react to things that happen. There's a lot of, after going through a lot of this, I'm like, wow, I think we've been pretty lucky that we haven't, some people could have taken issue with our school district on things. Like over the last couple years, we have a very small maintenance department, and so it's hard for them to keep up with everything. But about 2 years ago, I walk home and I have told my boss, I was like, it is dark. We only have one working parking lot light. And sure enough, last year we had a person fall and trip on a curb because they couldn't see it. And so she is very proactive, and as soon as that happened, that was number one priority on everything. I think that can also, measures to prevent, that can also be an important part of that. We have to make maintenance to property a priority. And if you see something that is wrong that could trip or injure somebody, fall, those kind of things, you have to report it. Or if a door is left unlocked a lot, and it's something that students, like in our auditorium, if students could go in there and climb up into the rafters, which they would try to if they had the opportunity, we have to make sure that that's consistently locked. And so that can easily be a discussion with faculty as well. I think it's really important also to have rules on supervision. So recess, classroom, hall monitoring times, before and after school as kids enter the parking lot. It is really important to set expectations, tell the students expectations, repeat them, and then make sure that you have somebody stationed places. You need to say, I'm still thinking about the school district that, they had one recess aide for 100 kids. I don't feel like that's appropriate. So setting school classes, making sure you have enough people watching, especially those times where kids get to be a little free and run around and play, to ensure that hopefully kids don't get hurt in those opportunities. They will be kids, but as long as you are providing those things, you should be able to defend yourself when it comes to negligence. Professional ethics. This is one that has become really interesting for us in the last couple of years because we have had several teachers get alternatively licensed to become teachers. So thinking of our transportation director actually got licensed to teach engine courses. And he is amazing. The kids love him. I learn from him. But when it comes to, he never had teacher ed courses. So there are some things that are inappropriate that I've had to have discussions with him of, no, you can't really let a student sit in the classroom and do something or go work on this. Everybody has to be accounted for at all times, especially in a shop atmosphere. I have an ag welding class, and that is something that I am hypersensitive to. I want to see all of my students all the time. No one can go to the classroom by themselves. Nobody can go to the shop by themselves. They're always so mad at me when I have to be gone for something and they can't go to the shop with a sub. But that sub is not a licensed individual in that area. So we have to be hypersensitive to issues that can arise, and it's kind of like one of those, we have to become helicopter parents, unfortunately. And I know that my students are like, oh, Ms. Watt, that would never happen. I would never trip there. And I'm like, you could trip there. So the final thing that I think is really important to do is that we have to cover basic rules with everybody that works on our campus. It cannot just be certified staff, licensed staff. It has to be everyone, from the cooks to the tech people, to the janitors, to the teachers. You have to every year, have a big discussion about this is how we keep students safe. Bus drivers, everybody has to know that the things that they say, the actions that they take could absolutely come back on them in a tort liability case.